I now call this regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 5:30 p.m. Please call the roll.
Ms. Pearson?
Present.
Mr. Schubert? Ms. McCall?
Present.
Ms. Bennett? Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Ms. Haley?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 5 present, 2 absent, we have a quorum.
We'll now take a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. As we start each board meeting, it bears reminding that the mission for Rockford Public Schools is to collaboratively engage all students in an equitable first-class education for a changing world. I want to thank Ms. Kim Pedersen and Aaron Hill, who are working behind the scenes to produce the broadcast via YouTube, live stream, and Comcast Channel 20. Are there any changes, corrections, or additions to the meeting minutes? If not, they are accepted as submitted. Thank you. Ms. Stanford would now lead the internal and external stakeholder committee portion of the meeting. Ms. Stanford, it's all yours.
We'll begin by showing our committee's 12-month agenda. And you'll notice we have filled this in for the upcoming year. It's just a first pass about the feature presentations each month. Take a look. They're not all set in stone. Some may change, but this is what we have so far. Now we'll celebrate the good things happening in our district. Westview Elementary held its end-of-year's award ceremony to highlight the remarkable growth and achievements of the students. After their hard work throughout the year, it's important for them to receive the recognition they have earned. Awards given out were for literacy, honoring growth and achievement in reading, music, art, and sportsmanship, honoring talents in the arts and PE specialties, attendance, honoring premium attendance standards, and citizenship, honoring students that have been recognized by their peers as exceptional classmates. Congratulations to all the award winners. Risa Middle School and the RPS 205 Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee held a Unity in Diversity event. It included a parade, food, music, raffles, and other activities. Traditional cultural attire was encouraged. STEAM Academy at Haskell fourth graders used their engineering skills to help enhance the school's annual field day event. Each of the 2 classes worked in teams of 3 students. One class incorporated simple machines to build a cardboard carnival. The other class created an 8-hole miniature golf course, each hole incorporating a different biome: desert, ocean, savanna, rainforest, prairie, tundra, mountains, and outer space. The students also helped the younger students use their creations during field day. The 2024 RPS 205 graduation celebration returned to the BMO Center on June 7th and 8th. Families came together to share in the achievements of their loved ones while creating lasting memories. More than 1,600 students from all 5 high schools walked across the stage to receive their diplomas. And now here's a highlight reel from the celebrations. Okay. Join us on Sunday, July 28th from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Illinois Bank and Trust Pavilion for the RPS 205 Athletic Hall of Fame. The class of 2024 includes Horace Box, Clarence Miller, Lori Miller, and Rick Schmitz. To learn more about the inductees or to purchase $25 tickets, please visit the athletics page on our website. The RPS Robotics program held a STEM Robotics Festival at the Discovery Center for students at Spring Creek and Lathrop Elementary Schools. These schools participated in the first Robotics Explore and Discover programs. Students also worked with Bet's Bots to design and build cardboard robots that competed in a sumo bot style competition. The event was sponsored by the Golden Apple Foundation STEM Grants Program and the Discovery Center. Rockford Area Habitat for Humanity and RPS 205 celebrated the hard work from students at both East and Jefferson High Schools. Each school built a home for Habitat from the ground up in a subdivision off of Sandy Hollow Road. These students have been on the build sites all year long, learning everything they need to know about constructing a house and the skilled trades. They not only built a future for a new family in need, but the students are building their futures too. Congratulations and great job. The 205 Vibe was created to share the amazing things happening in Rockford Public Schools. It publishes firsthand stories from district staff, students, and community members who support RPS 205. Our featured blog for the month of July will be about third Best in State Award for Jefferson artists. Our legislative team will be here in September to present to the board. The Illinois House and Senate will reconvene for the veto session. RPS 205 was a sponsor of the 34th annual Juneteenth celebration that was held on Wednesday, June 19th at Sinisippi Park. The event included an RPS 205 talent show and student awards. And now for our feature presentation from Chief DEI Officer, Dr. Antoine Reed, on teacher listening sessions that were held earlier this year. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Stanford. Feels strange without Brother Earl being here. I just want to say that before I get started. So we are going to talk about our listening sessions and our report that we got from the listening sessions. Before I get started, I just want to let you know what they are and, give you some content. We did this with many stakeholders, and we've not got it done. We have to go ahead and get the information compiled from our counselors, our assistant principals, and once we have that, we would have had every stakeholder that would have had the listening session done, and we'll be prepared to share things in the future around some actionables. But these listening sessions are not for us to go ahead and resolve the problem. It is definitely for us to make sure we listen, get some strategies, gain insight from our various stakeholders. For the Rockford Public Schools, is to build that relationship, build community. This is a unique moment to listen and respond in a way that shows we're listening. And not just we're listening, but we're going to take the information, compile the data, qualitative and quantitative. The cabinet is going to prioritize selected issues and require immediate attention around some of the solutions that we heard from these listening sessions. We're going to convene district leaders, administrators, and content experts to help resolve some of the issues that we heard throughout the listening sessions. And we're going to make sure we provide updates and progress and timelines around these implementations and strategies. We don't want to just listen. We want to make sure we're active, but we want to make sure that we're collective and we have all the right stakeholders at the table when we're making some of these decisions. Active listening for our teachers was a phenomenal one. We had many teachers come out to represent every side of Rockford, all grade levels, and they were really intentional in that space. In January, we wanted to build a space where we can truly have an open dialogue about the experience of being a teacher in RPS. Had around 80 teachers from, like I said, various grade levels and backgrounds. And these unique and essential conversations allowed us to get to the heart of the teaching experience in Rockford Public Schools. Knowing what they feel, what our teachers expect, that gives us a roadmap to success. You know, everything that we do as a district, it starts in that classroom. You know, no matter what we do, it has to get down to the core of the instruction in the classroom. So what follows are the themes and insights that came out of these conversations, and that's what I'm going to share with you all tonight. One of the first themes that I don't think it's just RPS centric, but it is something that really came out was the focus on student behavior and discipline challenges. Some of our teachers share that, you know, some of the disruptive scholars are getting opportunities to get out that classroom consistently 1 and 3 times a week, and they're not in the classroom learning. They feel some of our scholars that have some of the most challenges need to be in the classroom more, and we need to make sure that we're recognizing some of the scholars that are not being removed from the class and give them some of those opportunities to shine. The next thing is there's a lack of consistency in disciplinary actions for some of the disruptive behaviors, and they felt that social media, especially after the pandemic, played a key role in negatively influencing some of the scholar behaviors. Scholars are difficult to engage, and they lack some of the supports and intervention at the elementary and pre-K. I remember one of the teachers saying, you got to think about it during COVID. Many parents were wore down and just said yes to everything to their kids. Hey, you want this? Yes, yes, yes. Then they came back into school and you had to hear no, 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 you know. And that is a hard thing for a young scholar to hear no, no, no after you were told yes, 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 and, you know, for a couple of years there. So another thing that we saw from our teachers was a key focus around mental health support for students and staff. One of the teachers said, quote, the other day I was just overwhelmed by the load. We're just so burdened by the number of tasks that we have to do after our contract hours. We are given what we can, and by the time we're done with that, we're drained. We have no energy for anything. So the teachers are just talking about the work-life balance, how much they care, how much they see the challenges that we have and the things that they have to do after hours. And we talked about, you know, some of the teachers mentioned that students need additional mental health support. The teachers are feeling that overwhelmment and that burnout. The next thing that aligns with that burnout was technology in the education environment. If we want to end this whole social media and cell phone thing at the school, help us get serious about it. Get rid of the phones. Our lack of action is embarrassing. Now, I would say this is another thing that you see a theme that is not RPS-centric across America. That issue with the cell phones has been confronted, challenged in various ways, where some districts are taking the pouch and putting them up, losing the phones. There have been a myriad of things that have happened with their cell phones, but the teachers are looking at that and want us to key in on some action moves around the technology balance. Technology is having a negative effect on students' behavior and learning. Once again, remove the smartphones from the classroom was a theme. Lack of accountability and the discipline measures regarding technology use was one of the things that the teachers continued to share. And then from that came the lack of leadership and support. I struggle with a lack of leadership from admin. We are often told our ideals are great and we should do it, but we do not receive additional guidance. And then so when it goes wrong, it's immediately our fault. So there's a lack of accountability all the way around. So what we learned here is district leaders are disconnected from the frontline educators. Teachers want more recognition and support from administration. Teachers need more ongoing professional development and training. Theme 5 is building stakeholder trust. We have to work on trust. If parents trusted us, they would see the value in education and know we care. These parents love their kids, but they don't trust us. What we learn is communication breakdowns between district leadership and teachers create some of that lack of parental trust in the educational system, according to our teachers. Fostering trust is crucial for parental involvement and student success. There's a need to reiterate the value of education to students and parents alike. Theme 6 was advancing cultural awareness. It is not our students' job to teach us about their cultures. I think RPS needs to provide us with professional development time within the school day to learn about the cultures of our scholars. What we learn, understanding and integrating scholars' diversity and culture and background within the classroom creates opportunities. And the teachers feel that this is an opportunity for professional development from the district level. Thing 7 was confusing policies on attendance grading and teacher evaluation. I have a student I don't see. He hasn't been here all month, but he's going to come one day, take one test, and believe with all the little Z's he's going to pass the class. What we learn is there's a disconnect between evaluation criteria and the need of education. Attendance policy seems to prioritize tardiness over full period absences. Teachers are dissatisfied with grading and assessment policies. Apathy among teachers is resulting in inaccurate data. So we've heard all this, and some of the things we're painful to hear, and just one of the things that you don't get to see here is some of the good things that they do share about us. Among all the things we heard here, there were teachers that said that all this, and I would not leave Rockford for anything. This is my destination. This is where I want to be, and we have so many winning things to take place. We did share the data for some of the things that we can improve, but I will say that that part was not as captured because many teachers that did say we can improve, they said, I'm staying here because I want to be here, and this is the place I love, and we have so much, so much potential here. And that was resounding. All those teachers came back, and they want to do it again, and they will continue to come back. They said, I would rather take less pay and stay here than go somewhere else. So that part was not shared there, but that was a continued thing that was shared in the theme that we probably didn't hear, that they are down for being an RPS teacher. They just want their voice to be heard and us to take some actionables on some of the things that they feel are important in their classroom. So what we're going to do is we're going to definitely make sure we compile qualitative and quantitative insights. Our cabinet is going to prioritize some of the key things and themes that we've heard. And we're going to make sure, like we said, we get the content experts together to make sure we have clear actionables. We're not just going to jump out on emotions and feelings, but we're going to use that data to make sure we have sustainable actions. And we're going to provide updates and progress to our board, our families, and our communities about what we're doing around what we heard. I will say we have to, one more time, compile all the data. We just listened to counselors and got some very valuable information. We wrapped up the assistant principals. We gave every stakeholder a chance to have a voice. And doing that is something unique. You don't hear a lot of districts that go around and make sure they capture every voice throughout their district and then make sure we have informed, compiled decisions. So at this point, we're going to be looking at those, all the stakeholders' voices and bringing them together, and we'll have something to bring back in the future. So that's it on the teachers listening sessions. Are there any questions there?
Ms. Pearson?
Yes, I have more of a statement. So we know that we do have a cell phone policy. The problem is we didn't really do a very good job in enforcing that policy. And not only will the students have a problem with it, but the parents will have a problem with it because they've already saw and viewed the TikToks on I bought my child that cell phone. And I think how there is no room for a cell phone in classrooms. And I think that we really need to think on how we can meet students' needs whose parents are so adamant that they need their cell phone. Whether it is something related to domestic or medical, we need to make sure that we are enforcing the policy without punitive damages, because everything has a link to it. And so, so many tardies and there's consequences for that. While we understand that walking in the class late regularly disrupt the class. So we're faced with a great challenge on how we're going to balance everything from the cell phones in schools, in classrooms, and what we're really going to do about that, because many of the discipline packets, roads lead back to cell phone usage during school hours. So I would hope that we really be very, make it very plain and specific guidelines and make it very clear to parents that it will no longer be tolerated to have cell phones in classrooms. So again, you know, I would hate to look at a discipline packet and see a list of apparent interventions or a track record of cell phone policy violation to mount up to something more significant. So if we could really keep that in mind and know that it's going to be a challenge, but the cell phones literally have to be removed from our classrooms. So whether it is confiscated at the door when they come in, and how we're going to communicate that to the parents, it creates another task. If the phones are there, who's babysitting the phones? How are they being check in and check out? So there's many details that come into play, and so we can identify problems, but we need an effective plan on how to carry that out. But if you're not going to follow a policy and hold students and parents accountable, because the parents have to have some accountability as well. And so I certainly hope that we can get that piece worked out.
Ms. Haley?
So I'm glad Ms. Pearson addressed the cell phone policy, so I agree with everything she said, but I also think there's some low-hanging fruit that was mentioned during the presentation, although there are some very complex issues that are going to require, you know, smart people getting their heads together. But, you know, the one that kind of stood out to me was the cultural competencies, so that teachers, staff understand we have such a diverse population in the schools. And I think that with that diverse population, that's the low-hanging fruit. We should be able to offer some type of training where staff and teachers are able to understand different cultures and different races and their traditions, their cultures, so that they are able to better relate to the students. So that's just one of the areas that's kind of stood out to me, although the other stuff is very important as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stanford.
Okay. Okay, so we finished with the board calendar. And I just want to make a note here that I've been told that once Aptigee is up and running, we're going to have a new type of calendar where many things are folding into our calendar, so there's going to be a lot more for us to see on this calendar. So anyway, make sure you check it out and for the most up-to-date information. Now, if there's any board member who has anything they'd like to share regarding any school events you've attended or interactions you've had in the community, this would be the time. Ms. McCall?
I just want to say or mention that I attended all the graduations this year, didn't miss one. It was very rewarding. I even attended I.B. Conklin's kindergarten graduation. I attended Barber dual language 8th grade graduation and Lincoln Middle School's 8th grade graduation. So it's my favorite time of the year, and I love being able to see the students during graduations. And also, as you saw a picture, Juneteenth and everything, like throughout the summer, I'm still very engaged with the students. I went with a group of students from the Rockford Park District to a WNBA game. We went to see the Chicago Sky a couple of weeks ago with a bunch of elementary school and middle schoolers. And, you know, I just enjoy being amongst the students. So anytime there's an event or anything that anybody you guys want me to come, if my schedule allows, I would love to go out and be a part of it and participate in whatever's going on with the students. And that's it.
Anyone else? Ms. Pearson?
I want to first thank all the principals for the work that they put into in preparing and executing a graduation. It's not easy if you know anything about events, and it doesn't matter how annual it is, things happen, and it is not always an easy task. I made it to the majority of the graduations that my schedule would permit. There was a lot of scheduling conflict and moving parts, but I want to congratulate all of the graduates. I received more invitations to graduation parties this year. I think it was a record, so that was an additional opportunity, of course, to engage with families. I never miss an opportunity to engage with families. If you invite me, then I will share. So that was, it was good being able to connect with families and help them understand that everything that their definition of one thing may not be actual or factual. And so that is an opportunity to kind of shed some light. So again, congratulations to both the students and principals.
I forgot to mention also, in addition to the graduations celebration, I was also afforded the opportunity to attend a lot of their scholarship ceremonies. So we have a great number of students that was awarded scholarships from the Community Foundation of Northern Illinois. Also students that was awarded scholarships from Rockford Association for Minority Management, RAM, and Alpha Kappa Sorority. Our students are phenomenal. I was at one graduation party and the table was just covered with scholarships and accolades and things like that they've received. So just wanted to give a shout out to all of our scholars who are able to offset some of those costs of going to college. So thank you.
I'm sorry, Ms. Stanford. Another thing I wanted to acknowledge is the Kappa programs. So I think that it is remarkable, even for students that have graduated RPS 205, and you can still see the talent in our community. I had an opportunity to see Color Purple, and I looked on the stage and I seen, although they've graduated, I still see the talent that came out of RPS 205, and that was rather rewarding. And I saw diversity and inclusion as well. That it was absolutely remarkable. The talent was unbelievable. And the community members that showed up, I don't think that I've ever seen such a diverse event since I'm born and raised Rockford. And it was something to see. So kudos to our former students as well as our present.
Mr. Carpenter?
Thanks. I'll echo those sentiments on the graduation and thank all the principals, Dr. Morgan's team also with the new lady, everyone with the returning the venue back to the BMO Metro Center. I think everybody really enjoyed that and appreciated that, and I didn't hear anybody with complaints about that, and I look forward to doing that again next year. Also, I want to thank and appreciate the teachers that come to the graduations, especially the high school teachers showing their support of the graduations. That's great, but also, you know, recognize all the teachers that all graduates had throughout their career. You know, every teacher has an impact on the students getting to that destination of graduation. So I really appreciate all the educators and all the professionals that help those students get there. And I would also just mention that a special congratulations to graduate Casey Carpenter, who was a Guilford graduate this year. So, yes. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? We have one consent item on our agenda, and it is the girls swimming co-op with Auburn, East, and Jefferson. Does anyone have any questions on that? That would conclude our report.
Thank you, Ms. Stanford. Ms. Haley will now lead the Performance and Monitoring Committee. Ms. Haley.
So tonight, we will have one presentation, which will be the semi-annual report on the ARP ESSER spending. As a reminder, the administration prepares a report twice per year to update the board on the progress of our spending and what's been accomplished. The final report in this series will be given in January of 2025. Dr. Brown will now lead us through tonight's presentation. Dr. Brown?
Okay, the semi-annual report. So just a reminder on what we were really trying to do with the COVID money that we did receive. You know, the big theme was to figure out ways to extend time for our students. And so we did it in a number of different ways, you know, with growing community partnerships, the improving facilities, which we'll finish this summer, which will literally provide air conditioning in every single one of our buildings, allowing us to operate, you know, basically 12 months out of the year if we needed to. And then really trying to renew, support, and develop our staff. So the amount spent year to date by required category is coming up on this next slide. So you can see 3 columns there. The first column is the CARES Act, and that was the first wave of money that we received. The second was what they called ESSER 2, and then the third is the ARP ESSER, and that's the money that we're actually spending on right now. We have spent and closed out the CARES Act and ESSER 2, so those were completed in September 30th of 2023, and so we are actually done with those. The next one really is detail on ARP ESSER, which is the one that we're actually spending in now. We did change this slide a little bit from what you've seen in the past because the way that ISB required us to break this out was actually in a little bit different categories than we had broken out on the other ones. And so these are actually going to show you the categories on how the grant was actually approved by the state. You can see in the first column there the amount that was awarded, the amount that's been paid to date so far, and then the outstanding balance there. And I know those outstanding balances look big, but believe me, we will make sure that we spend all that money by September 30th of 2024. This is the last few categories there of the money. Totaling again that 157 million, spent about 100 million to date, and that's as of April 30th. And so we still had a lot to spend, you know, all the way through this summer. And we still have, you know, until September 30th to complete the construction on those projects and wrap those up. So the learning loss strategy, the one thing that was unique about this last wave of money was that we were required to spend 20% of the money, or roughly $36 million, on learning loss strategies. So you can see from this slide that we were required to spend 36, and what we've actually got budgeted with the state as of March 31st was actually 39 million of the amount that we were going to spend on learning loss. You can see the amount paid to date, and again, that outstanding balance looks big, but you know, there will be no problem with, you know, the amount that we spent, finishing up with the extended day, and then what we plan to do this summer, you know, as far as spending the required amount of money. Closer look, these are a couple of the contracts that we had for learning loss. We've talked about a number of these in the past, the Paper.co, which was the online tutoring, Dialed Care, which was, you know, kind of online SEL support, the Rosecrans contract, Star 360, Panorama Ed. And then we've got the Live, Learn, Play, you know, partnerships that we had with a number of entities throughout the community. You can see there the amounts that were awarded and the amounts that were paid to date. A couple of the contracts didn't, at least through April 30th, haven't come really close to those amounts awarded. Some of that was due to the fact that, honestly, they had trouble hiring people. to be able to fulfill what they originally planned to do. And so that was especially the case with like the YMCA and a couple of the other community groups. They had a really great plan, but they just weren't able to staff to be able to, support the number of kids they thought they were going to be able to. But for the vast majority of them, they completed, the work successfully. And just kind of swinging through here. There are some of these contracts that are going to continue after the ARP ESSER is done. One of the big ones that's going to continue is Antoine Harris. A number of the buildings have decided to use their discretionary funds to actually bring the Antoine Harris group, back in next year because he's had such a significant impact with the work that he's done, at the high school level. And I know that Auburn's planning on bringing him back, and I think East is planning on bringing him back as well. So he's had a real big impact on our students. He was here and actually made a presentation several months ago to the board, and so he's really done a nice job with our kids. Air quality strategy, that was a big one. You can see here what we've got left to do this summer. That project schedule may look pretty aggressive, but some of that work actually started last year. So these are projects that are just going to finish up. We were able to, with some of the savings we realized in the contingency, add back a few of the smaller projects. You can see in bullet point 1B down there, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Marshall Elementary, and Marshall Middle School are actually going to get some work done this summer as well because we were able to add back projects we originally had taken out because we were afraid we were going to have overruns. And then once we started to bid projects, we actually did a little bit better with the money. So there's kind of the total original estimated budget for the facility. We're showing ESSER 2 in there because it had a significant component to. The ARP ESSER was $150 million. So a total of $165 million plus or minus that we were able to do with the COVID money. Total cost to date, $119 million. We'll spend the rest of that, no problem, again, by September 30th. The one last piece of this was really the transportation piece. We really did work on, trying to remove barriers for transportation there. We were able to pick up students that lived within 1.5 miles of their zone school. That's not something that's reimbursable by the State Board of Education. So we did attempt to do this. We were challenged by driver shortages to really execute that well. And then on the early childhood side of things, we did contract with Everdriven and Sunrise, and they too were challenged to be able to meet the needs of being able to pick up all the kids as well. So any questions on that update? Okay.
With the Live, Learn, Play partners that we work with, will we be receiving a list of the ones who will be retained, and or do you know?
I don't know all the ones that will be retained because those are really going to be up to the buildings to see if they want to continue, but we can work on trying to put that together.
Okay.
The only one I knew for sure, because I saw it during the budget process, was Antoine Harris.
Okay. And is his program, is it being expanded beyond, I didn't catch that. Was it being expanded beyond what he's doing right now?
I don't know if it's going to be expanded or really just continued.
Okay.
Yep.
I thought Antoine Harris was initially at West, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And as a result of that, the work that he's done at West, he's going to be utilized in high schools? Or did he?
He is. He was actually working at Auburn, and I believe he's also working at East as well.
But he's not going to be at any of the other high schools?
Not that I know of.
Oh,
Those
okay.
are the only ones I saw that we're planning to continue with him for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Will he continue to be at West?
I don't know if he's planning on continuing to be at West or not. I'm not sure on that one. The only ones I saw it on were Auburn and East.
Well, there would be a new captain of the ship at West. So
Right.
that would be a determining factor if that principal decides to continue, correct?
Right.
I'm happy to provide all the locations that Antoine Harris will be at.
Okay.
Next school year.
Okay, thank you.
But I think that is the plan for West, that it'll continue for next year as well. I'll provide confirmation of all the schools though.
Not to speak directly, but did Dr. Turner do like a recommendation or transfer of the guards or recommendation to the next principal that comes in on what worked? And okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? I'm sorry, I didn't ask this earlier. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Brown's report? Okay. Our last item tonight is to preview the consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments on the consent agenda items?
I do. So perhaps Mr. Pearson can, there's a contract in regards to yes, and in regards to transportation, or did I? Okay. Mr. Pearson, does that ring a bell for you?
Yes, it's the bus driver campaign.
Okay, so if the origin of the problem is finding workers, what will this organization do that we can't?
We can't target nearly to the amount of people necessary to pull new talent into the district to provide options and additional drivers. Through research that we had done before the initial project kicked off, while we've tried to promote this in the past, we've never truly targeted people in a really effective way to make the benefits, the hourly wage, and the value that the district provides potential drivers to want to engage with the district. We're telling a completely different story in a new way that we believe will pull in additional talent.
Okay, so are you looking outside of Rockford, or are you focusing on the surrounding areas, or you feel like there is, a portion that we have missed or wasn't able to reach in Rockford?
We're focusing on Rockford, but we're also looking just outside of it as well. And then based on engagement rates that we get on content, when we push out any sort of advertising online, we can track how many people actually view it and engage with it. Mm-hmm. Those numbers allow us to either stay in that area or push somewhere else.
And what are those numbers looking like?
I don't have them on me right now, but
okay.
I can prepare a presentation in the future to show what worked and what didn't.
Okay, can you have that information by the next board meeting?
Potentially.
Up to date of the engagement thus far?
Maybe yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. This concludes the work of the Performance Monitoring Committee for tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Haley. And Vice President McCall will now lead Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. The Facilities Master Plan. I will turn the floor over to Board President Pearson to lead us in the discussion on the Facilities Master Plan.
Thank you. So there was a little, of course, it is no secret that I am a huge advocate for Subdistrict A. And so I don't think that it came out clear. I made a statement that Kennedy was not included, which was not accurate. My thought was with focus on the conversations, and it was more in relation to a popular option A. So it looks like that there were lots of conversation, and conversation is good, but the execution is even better. So there was an option of STEAM strand 2K to Kennedy, multiple scenarios or times that it came up. There was some additional information. So when we look at option A on the previous information that was provided to us versus, I believe it was C, one moment, please. I'm interested in knowing what were the weighted, I just had that, here it is. So scenario A was IB at Conklin and STEAM at West. Scenario B was IB, STEAM, Kappa at West. And scenario C, IB at Conklin, STEAM at Kennedy Middle School. And it seemed like scenario A was the one that was most popular. So I'm interested in knowing if it is not scenario C. When I think of a master's facility plan, and we're focused on, I would think that academic achievement would be the driving force in our master's facility plan. And so when I look at the state of Kennedy, when you look at the enrollment, and the master's facility plan also address the population of schools, why wouldn't we focus more on scenario C? I'm interested in knowing the board members' rationale behind the greater support for scenario A.
I think that if I may, the reason that scenario A was, I think that was the plan that was put forth by the steering committee, and that the reason why the board members, I think, agreed with that, or generally agreed with that plan, was that it kept Kappa at West and put STEAM at West, which has an alignment with Kappa. I think that that's the short answer for that.
Okay, and also, in addition to that, not only does Kappa and STEAM align perfectly together, but West Middle School also has I would say, the best facility to house both of those programs as they matriculate from throughout middle school. If that option were to be moved any other place, say as if it had to be moved to Kennedy, then there will be great, improvements or upgrades and different things that's going to be needed to have the same like dance studios and all of that, all of the things that are required for the arts and the STEAM program. Additionally, for IB, for option A, for the IB, it was my understanding that there's space for the IB to have the IB school at the location for expansion. It's going to be, it was already approved for K through 8, and as the first year has started, we have to start ramping up for the 6th grade and the 7th grade and the 8th grade. So we have to prepare to house those students as well. And it just seems like instead of moving the program all the way, or moving the program over to Kennedy and then having to disrupt the population or the zoning or the area for the schools, for the students in that school, it made sense just to have it all at West, have IB expand where it is, and then focus on other improvements at Kennedy as it goes on.
Okay, and so this is just discussion. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about master's facility plan, mm-hmm. I think we need to consider many other factors. And so if Kennedy need upgrades, that's what the master's facility plan should be one of their focus. It's the master's facility plan. And I also understand that the IB school was previously voted on. And we know that not every single item in a master's facility plan, it may or may not happen. However, when we're looking at academic achievement and population of a school and meeting the needs of a school, our families, and the need for schools to be upgraded, I think that that should be considered in the master's facility plan. I hear what you're saying, and it also makes sense, but I think that we are missing an opportunity, and to disrupt, that's a whole nother conversation that will cause me to go back to rehash the original disruption that the IB school came into play. So I think that we should spread the wealth and make it more equitable for academic achievement, meeting the need for student population as well.
You ready?
Go ahead.
Okay, in the package you received, there's information that provides what each school is receiving as far as different needs and in the order of different needs. So, like you said, like Kennedy has not been, there are upgrades and improvements for Kennedy Middle School, just not at that extent that it will cost if you were to put the two programs over there in lieu of West. Additionally, if you look in your packet, you'll have things and you'll have information about how the money that we have, how it's going to be allocated over the facilities master plans, the life of the facilities master plan of this one. Additionally, there are a lot of things that needs to be improved, right? The school district is, you can only do what you have the funds to do. So that's why we have all these community discussions. That's why we have all this in-depth look once, twice, 3 times, 1 million times to make sure that we're getting the maximum amount of improvements for the budget that we have been allotted.
Okay, and I did receive it's in the packet, but it is RPS 205 responsibility to spend money in our schools. So, that goes without being said. I am focused on the master's facility plan. Other reasons, we know that bills are being passed. If we pay attention to the legislative information that we get and relate to bills, it's concerning globally what public education could potentially look like as is in the next 5 years, let alone 10. So there is a bigger picture that I'm looking at, and I will forever advocate in regards to facilities master plan and the needs of our schools. I'm not disputing the money that we put in our schools. Some of our school buildings are extremely old. We don't have an option. It's not that it is a gift or a treat. It is our responsibility. So, to say that or to compare monies that have been spent in schools to offset, for lack of a better word, the in-depth inclusion, I'll say, for a school, then that is not an enough why, because I think that we're missing an opportunity. And when we didn't have a problem with any previous disruption, but now at an opportunity for a Kennedy to be utilized and invested in, now we're concerned about disruption as one of the factors. Go ahead.
Okay, I may have used the wrong term for disruption. Kennedy Middle School, as it is now, has not been utilized to its capacity. So
exactly.
Right, so all the lack of students that are attending Kennedy now It doesn't affect what you're saying about,
So if STEAM was at Kennedy, it would increase you're saying it wouldn't increase the population there?
it depends on, there's a lot of factors on, the current students that are there now, if they elect to go to this program or that program. Like, there's a lot of variables that would determine it.
And so did the committee look at the variables?
The committee looked at every single options that we can think of as a collective committee. That's including all the information we got from the stakeholders, the information we got from the community, and even just, guesstimating, like, if for everything that needed to be completed on that master plan, what was it, like 300,000 or 400? I'm sorry.
The original estimate was approximately 400 million with all the projects we are looking at, and the steering committee was tasked to bring that down to $180 million.
Right. So with that, I mean, there's different ways that you can, different options, that could help us get to that 400 million, but how raising taxes or something, or there's a lot of different types of scenarios that can go. Instead of going that route, the steering committee put together a plan where all the schools can be touched with the funds that we have of 180 million. So there's always going to, you said yourself, there's our school buildings are old, the 41 buildings are, some of them are really old, that is true. However, you have to be, sometimes it has to be incremental, and when you're making these, that's why we have, these master plans, that's why we revisited, and just to make sure, that it's out there, that every building has been touched. We have in your packet the information about the last facilities plan, what was needed, and what was done, and the continuation to see, we're not trying to miss anything to make sure that every building is being upgraded, equitably.
Okay, so back to my understanding of a master's facility plan. And the $180 million. Now, I have said for 2 years the needs of some of our schools and how old they are. Now, there was a guesstimation, and it was shared that, demolition was not an expected item, yet on the original presentation that DLR did, I saw a category and dollar amount for demolition. So, and Mr. Phillips, you explained that was not an option or projection, but yet I saw it it was a...
What the DLR group was showing was the removal of the modular classrooms at 6 schools. That's what they labeled as demolition. What I shared at that board update, that rather than calling it demolition, there's an opportunity for us to resell those modular classrooms. But the goal is to remove those from the site to bring the students into the main buildings.
Okay, so let me ask this, over the next 5 to 10 years, do you see any of the schools in our district being demoed?
No.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, what is the plan for utilizing Kennedy given the population concern and what we're spending per day per student?
I think I can probably weigh in on that, Board President Pearson. I think it's going to be important that we do a couple things. One, we really believe it is significant to ensure that we look at how we can bring community resources and new academic focus to build on the good work that Principal Gray and her team have done at Kennedy Middle School, so that it becomes an increasingly popular choice with families that live in the neighborhood. We know that that is a school that there are a lot of families that are choosing charter schools or special programs at that current site when we looked at the data. And we know that we need additional academic investment to, as well as community investment. So we will be looking at building a plan that we can share with the board in partnership with Principal Gray and the schools team to look at what kind of community investment we can make as well as academic investment. The other option that we have looked at to grow enrollment and maximize utilization would be the utilization of, we do have some students potentially that are zoned currently to West that attended Welsh and previously attended Welsh. We attempted for a busing reason to move these students to McIntosh and then and now we are going to, I believe, address that. So that should also enhance enrollment. So I think when we look at increasing utilization, the two biggest strategies, as opposed to bringing a special program in, which was an option the committee considered, the other option is to slightly increase the size of the zoned enrollment, number one, and number two, to really invest in the school academically and community-wise to ensure that we have a higher percentage of students in the zone selecting Kennedy. And so we will be reporting back to the board on our efforts to support the elementary schools that feed into Kennedy, as well as Kennedy itself. Mr. Phillips, anything you would want to add to that? I think we're talking about 100 students or so that would be added with that change, which will help deal with some of the overcrowding concerns at McIntosh as well.
Any other questions?
No, I'm just not in regards to the master's facility plan tonight, but I do have a question too for Dr. Jarrett. When you mentioned the overcrowding at McIntosh, what else did you have in mind to fix that problem?
I do believe this zone change will certainly help with that. In addition, we are continuing to work with the McIntosh faculty to talk about building utilization of the school. At this point, we've moved away from the idea of housing classrooms at Kennedy Middle School. So we will have a plan in place to house the students at McIntosh. Over time, we will see the enrollment decrease. And based on the preliminary meetings we've had internally, we believe we can meet the needs of the students without having to move the students, for the 5th grade students, over to Kennedy. We've relooked at the configuration of the building, and I'm confident, and we've shared that with families, that we will be able to maintain 5th grade at McIntosh. And I believe also we will be able to, over time, have that enrollment bubble that was created. And again, none of this was by design or intention. Families at McIntosh were prioritized in the decision when they were included in the footprint that was prioritized for IB. It's hard to tell how many families from any one neighborhood school will choose that IB as an option. And so the other option we will continue to have, of course, first and foremost, we will invest in McIntosh. But McIntosh families, along with Welsh and Westview families, will continue to receive top priority for seats at IB. And then we open it up to the rest of the district from there. So those are a couple other options. But I think first and foremost, this is about that sliver of students that we were sending to McIntosh that are actually closer to Welsh. We had good intentions. We thought that would provide some transportation advantages, and I think what we're going to do, Mr. Phillips, is still be able to provide transportation, but move those students back to Welsh.
That's correct.
Thank you. So for the sake of transparency, I think it is worth noting that McIntosh was not included on the front end of the planning for the IB school. When it was discovered that the additional students needed a place, we rezoned and students went to McIntosh. And that was not, unfortunately, we did not deal with the zoning and what that would look like before we voted on the IB. And I'm not crying over spilled milk, but I think it's just, as we talk about trust and community engagement, we can't leave out transparency. So we created a problem, and we can't act like it didn't exist, and, oh, well, we're going to continue to build and continue to shuffle kids. And so, again, there's no other direction for us to go at this point but forward. But just so we know, and I certainly hope that this is a learning experience for us when we come up with a plan to make sure that we have things in the proper order, because some things can be prevented had, information had been provided early on. So while I may occasionally make reference as a point of, lesson learned, we've got to move forward. But I will continue to ask questions along the way. And perhaps I'm overly concerned, but I'm really concerned legislatively what our public school will look like in the next 5 or 10 years. And I think that it is worth paying attention to do all we can while we can, and from an equitable standpoint. Ms. McCall, thank you, and Mr. Phillips for putting this back on the agenda for further discussion. Thanks.
Is there any other discussion, questions? Okay, this facilities master plan will be brought back to the board on July 16th, 2024 for a vote. Item 9B is the Emergency Life Safety Amendment, National Early Childhood. I will turn the floor over to Board President Pearson to lead us in the discussion about the emergency abatement at Nashhold.
Thank you. So I think it was last week, Mr. Phillips sent an email. We all received the email. And of course, when I received the email, I'm looking at the timeline. And when I hear or see the word emergency, then I'm looking at, what we did from point A to where we're at. And I saw some time lapse in the notification of an emergency, which made me think, what really defines an emergency? So I go to, I believe it's policy 4.60, Lori, is that the correct policy in regards to contract? Right. So, and it talks about the $35,000 without board approval, unless, of course, an emergency. So, one, should we be more definitive within the policy on what an emergency is? And do we need a protocol in place of what to do in the event of an emergency? Because it looked like there was possibly no anticipation. I don't know how old Nashhold is, but there was possibly no anticipation on potential problems that we could run into. If there's any contracts, it's not my area. Attorney Holtley will have to, of course, elaborate on that, but could there have been any contingencies in place in the event of, so we not lose time? But when I receive an email in regards to an emergency, and if, I don't sign this document, then it could, delay school starting at Nashville. Then Dr. Jarrett and I spoke, and we agreed to put it on the committee of the whole, and that way we could actually vote on it because we had time lapse. I don't foresee it delaying if we wait for a vote. The one concern is a more definitive definition of an emergency in 4.0. And secondly, will it really delay it if we just waited until we voted on it on the 16th? Because it was like 2 weeks before.
Board President Pearson, I just want to clarify. So when Mr. Phillips informed me and the board that this had occurred and discussed with Attorney Holdley, he had already made that decision based on the interpretation of the board policy to move forward with this emergency. Mm-hmm. And so in bringing this forward, there isn't I just want to be clear with you in full transparency that there isn't an option at this point to go back on this decision. I think what we are asking for you and the board is advice on improving the notification protocol and clarity, as you've so clearly pointed out, to make sure that we are crystal clear on when to use this and when to not use this. I think as Mr. Phillips and I discussed this, one opportunity for improvement would be some kind of immediate notification that we are contemplating this. Mm-hmm. Like the second we hear about it. The only delay, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Phillips, was because he wanted to make sure he had actual cost numbers before he notified the board, and that took about 2 business days, I believe, to get the details, and then the attempt was to share that. But I'll certainly let Mr. Phillips.
So just quickly, I was notified about this issue on the afternoon of Friday, June 14th. So what I immediately asked our owner's representative to do was schedule a meeting on Monday the 17th. So we could fully understand what the issue was, and to really make sure with what they were proposing is what we need to do. Just for full disclosure, we have a contingency, and we were carrying an allowance for abatement. This was a totally unforeseen issue where we're removing a hard ceiling, and the piping in question could not be seen until we actually started removing the ceiling. So it was an issue that we just were not prepared for. Mm-hmm. And what really drove this as going towards an emergency, once a portion of the ceiling was down and was being completed by a subcontractor, and we identified friable asbestos on top of the ceiling, they no longer could demo that. That had to be abated. So we had there was no question. It wasn't like, well, we can stop here and do something different. We were halfway through a ceiling, and we had to address the issue. So as Dr. Jarrett said, when I discussed this with him, in hindsight, I should have alerted the board that this has happened. I am in the process of investigating costs and paperwork to move forward. So we had a couple different options, but my next meeting after the 17th was to meet with Dr. Brown and Dane Youngbug, Director of Purchasing, to really understand our best path forward from a financial standpoint. And then that's when Dr. Brown recommended let's move forward with an emergency life safety amendment. And knowing that we were proceeding, right. But by doing that, our architect gets involved. They notify ISB. They also notify the Regional Office of Education that we've run into an issue and we need to address this. Mm-hmm. It just, we're funding it differently than from ARP ESSER. As Dr. Jarrett said, it was important for me I wanted to make sure I had all the information to provide to the board rather than piecemeal. But going forward, obviously, we want to hear your thoughts tonight, but going forward from my standpoint, I will immediately alert the board to issues like this going forward. Typically, for an example, in a major water main break, a fire, something like that, a board would be immediately notified. In this case, it was more of a construction action, and I wanted to make sure I had my information.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
And I definitely appreciate you focusing on a plan. I mean, that makes sense, right? So I definitely appreciate that. And I think that we're still in a good place to vote on it on the 16th and move forward, correct?
May I speak to that?
Yes.
So it doesn't require a vote. What we have done under the board policy, as Mr. Phillips has already indicated, is he has committed those funds, and as I understand, the project is moving forward. And the reason why it is because it's construction at a school, and we have to make sure the school can open on time. Mm-hmm. What will come forward, and what I made sure I instituted when actually I was over operations, is that we also keep the board informed of any change orders. And so that's why we have the change order logs always brought forward, so that you can see the total scope of projects and any increase to those projects, because I felt that was really important, or decrease, because sometimes change orders may decrease a project. So that's just for full transparency to the board. But the funds have already been committed, am I correct? Yeah, so what we've asked you to do is actually sign the life safety amendment, which doesn't require a board vote. And it may or may not, they may or may not be able to get the change order on the July board.
No worries,
I don't know.
It'll be taken care of.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's on there, but that's, So I just wanted to make sure that you understood the project is still moving forward.
And Board President Pearson, what we wanted to ensure with the board as we reflect on, and we learn new things every day, even though Mr. Phillips has been doing this a long time, and I've been doing this for a while. We're trying to always improve what we do. So I think what we've learned from this is that when Mr. Phillips notified the board and I at that point, he had already gathered all the information. I think what he's proposing here is a two-step process, which is immediate notification that an emergency occurred, that he will be gathering that information and then following that up is what we would try to do moving forward.
Absolutely. And we will get that taken care of and signed off. I just felt it was worth a conversation. So again, Mr. Phillips, thank you for coming up with a plan and ready to answer questions and being transparent. I certainly appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or anything regarding this? Okay. The emergency abatement at Nashville will be included in the August RPS change order log. Item C, the tentative budget, FY25 tentative budget. I'll turn the floor over to Dr. Brown, the Chief Financial Officer, to present the 2025 tentative budget. Dr. Brown.
Okay, so you have a lot of attachments that were in the packet, and I'll just kind of run you through the attachments real quick. We're not going to spend a lot of time on those because some of those are just, routine things that we have to do. One of the things you'll see is the resolution to adopt the 24-25 budget. That's the first one of your attachments. That's just one of the things that we have to do by law. Number two is the actual budget resolution. Again, another one of the ISB requirements to actually pass the budget. Number three is kind of a lengthy document. You've actually got the handout with you. It looks like this. This is really kind of what we call the budget narrative. You can read this. I'm going to talk about it kind of in the Cliff Notes version, but the details there for you to go back and take a look at. And then what we're really going to spend time on here is that fourth thing in your packet, which is, the tentative budget presentation that I'm going to walk you through real quick. So we did make it. We did get to a balanced operating budget. So A balanced operating budget in terms of state requirements means that the education fund, the operations fund, the transportation fund, and the working cash fund all balance themselves out to zero. It doesn't mean that each individual fund is balanced. It just means that in total, the four of them are actually balanced. And so we'll take a look at that in just a minute. We do have planned deficit spending for capital expenditures. So that is due primarily to projects that the board's already approved in the past. And then we've actually made some assumptions that the new facility master plan is going to get approved and that we'll spend some of the money on there. On the expense side of things, you know, inflation has just been sticky, and, you know, we're continuing to see that. And we've also still seen a lot of wage pressure, and I think that we're going to have that in the future too. And then just a reminder, we talked about this, the ARP ESSER expires on September 30th of 2024. So the big budget assumptions here, evidence-based funding, we're looking at a slight increase, and we'll see a slide that will show that. The tax levy, we've basically assumed that the board would act in this coming December 2024, in a manner similar to they did last year, which is just taking new property but excluding CPI. We're probably going to recommend that you take CPI, but we didn't want to make the assumption that you were going to do that. So we haven't included that in the budget. And then the CPPRT, that corporate personal property replacement tax we've talked a lot about, we expect a pretty significant decline again due to economic conditions of slowing. So evidence-based funding, you can see there, you know, what has happened since the state implemented that, you know, for fiscal year 2018. We've been a real good beneficiary of the evidence-based funding. The gold bar is the amount that carried forward from the previous year. So if you look at 2023 there, you'll see $168 million in the base funding minimum, and then $9 million in what they call the tier funding. That totaled 177. So then if you look at 2024, that carries forward as the gold bar, our base for the following year. You can see in this last year that we just wound up last week, you can see we got $3 million of tier funding, and for this next fiscal year, we're assuming that we're going to get about $4 million. So that significant decrease in the tier funding from 2022 to 2024 was because of that huge increase that we got in the corporate personal property replacement tax. It had a direct impact on us. Why this hurts us is because that one-time money that we got from the CPPRT that we chose not to spend on recurring type expenses, because that's very dangerous to spend one-time money on recurring things, it meant that we permanently lost those tier funding dollars forever. So, you know, this one-time shot of one-time money cost us long-term money in that tier funding, you know, basically in perpetuity now. So that you'll see when we actually look at fund by fund, how that really has hurt us going forward. So again, this is just another one that shows the difference between the base minimum and the tiered funding. Property tax levy, we just talked about that. We've assumed right now that the board would enact the same kind of a levy that they did in the past year, which is new property. Again, just a reminder, we get half of the money in one year, fiscal year, and half in the other. We get payments in June, and then we get payments in September. This is kind of a summary of the property tax revenue you can see over time. If you look in the fifth column over, you'll see the tax rate there. We started out in 2008 with a tax rate of 5.45. You can see in 2023 there, the tax rate has actually gotten all the way back to 5.19. And I will tell you that that actually is the lowest tax rate of all the school districts in this entire region. So, you know, some fiscal management there by the board. In 2024, you can see that if all we do is take new property, we'll have a tax rate that's going to go under 5. And I will tell you, we've run the numbers, so even if the board does take CPI, we still think the tax rate will be under 5. So just kind of a preview of what we think it might look like there. You can see what the consumer price index has done throughout the year. So, you know, it started the year at 6.4 in 2023. We actually used the December overall CPI figure for what we do in 2024. So we'll be using a figure that's in that 3% range for the consumer price index. This is the biggie that I want to just briefly touch on. You can see there how the corporate personal property replacement tax just took a meteoric increase there. Went from $30 million in FY21 all the way up to $75 million, literally 2 years later. That's what's hurting us on the evidence-based funding calculations right now. So we're expecting this year for it to drop all the way down to about $36 million. So just a huge, huge decrease in the CPPRT numbers. Expenditures, as you guys know, the vast majority of our expenses are tied up in salary and benefits, and those are all per the negotiated bargaining contracts. We're expecting the health claims to actually run about the same as what they are this year, about 53.7 million. We feel pretty good about that number. Supplies and purchase services, those have increased per the contracts that we've walked through, literally since January when you guys have been seeing the individual department board presentations. Those are all reflected in the budget now, as well as some inflation estimates that we've made. So this again is just the operating funds, which is the education fund, the operation and maintenance fund, transportation fund, and then also the working cash fund. You can see that the operating fund budget is roughly $470 million. You can see the individual assumptions that we've made there for the local revenue, the state revenue, and then also the federal revenues. And then you can see on the expense side, we do have a balanced budget right now of that $470 million. Vast majority of it is in salary and benefits, as we've talked about before. As far as tentative budget, this one's really kind of hard to read. So actually what I'd like you to do, if you can, you can choose to read that one, or if you have access to it, just pull this 2-pager up, this little small one. I don't know if that was in your handout packet or not. I know the actual budget assumptions were, but if you can look at this one's actually a little bit easier to read, because it takes that big, huge budget document and basically summarizes the funds. So what you'll see there is, as far as the operating funds goes, you'll see a breakdown there between like the education fund, grants. Anything that starts with a 1 is in the education fund. Anything that is in the 2s says operation and maintenance. 40 is the transportation, and then 70 is the working cash. You can see in total there that all those are balanced. But what I want to point out to you is in the education fund, this year we're projected to run a pretty significant deficit in the education fund. And so that's partly due to the fact that we're not getting the same level of tiered funding, that we were getting under the evidence-based funding model because of that one-time CPPRT money. What we've really got to keep an eye on there is to make sure that that does not turn into a structural deficit. And so, we've got to be really, really cognizant of that. You will see on the operation and maintenance side of things, if you go in that far kind of grayish column there, you'll see a positive figure of I think it's $8 million or $8 million there. The reason that is actually so large in this coming year is we were getting really, really low on the fund balance in the operation and maintenance fund because we have been spending so much money on maintaining and operating our buildings that our fund balance was actually getting dangerously low in that fund. This gets it back up to about the ISB minimum of about 25% of total annual expenditures. So if we can maintain that, there's a possibility we'll be able to shift some of the dollars back over into the ed fund for the FY26 budget, but that's a number that we've really got to keep an eye on because when that came out, when we were finishing up the budget here, that was a number that gave me a pause right now. And so we don't want to get into a situation where we have a structural deficit in our biggest fund that contains all of the primary activities of instruction for the kids. And so that's something that we really just need to keep an eye on. This year we're okay, but we're really going to have to watch that next year and then hope that maybe we'll get back into tier 1 and that evidence-based funding will start to pick back up again, which will help offset that kind of a deficit. So that's just something that we're keeping an eye on right now. So these are just the non-operating funds. If you look at the bottom there, you'll see the capital funds. That's where we were talking about all the, the big planned deficit spending that we're doing. We're balanced in the operating funds, which is what ISB requires. That really is a reflection of, us really moving into the 5-year facility master plan and then finishing up a lot of the projects that the board's already approved. And with that, I'll entertain any questions. This will come back to you again in August. So this is really just a tentative budget. We've actually got it posted so people have access to it and can view it, and if they want to make comments, they'll be able to come to the August meeting, where we actually have a public hearing on this and it can actually weigh in. So, if we have to make any kind of tweaks between now and then, we'll update this information for you guys. But as of right now, we're good. We've got a balanced budget. We actually made the target. So, questions?
Okay. Any questions for Dr. Brown?
I just have one quick
Ms.
question.
Haley?
With the property taxes, is that for both residential and commercial property, new property?
Yes, if it was new property, it would be all new property. That's
Okay.
correct. Yep.
Okay. The resolution to adopt the FY25 budget will be brought forward for a vote at the August 20th, 2022 board meeting. Item D, SEL Tier 1 curriculum. Currently, the district does not have a defined SEL curriculum to support the students and staff in meeting the Illinois social emotional learning standards. The increasing need for effective social and emotional learning, SEL, in schools is evident as educators and policymakers recognize the role of SEL in promoting student well-being, academic success, and lifelong skills. Despite its importance, many existing SEL programs fail to engage students deeply or provide practical, real-world applications. This gap presents an opportunity to introduce a curriculum that is both impactful and engaging. Are there any questions for Ms. Gannon?
She's not here tonight, but I can answer.
Or Ms. Detman?
I do have a question.
Ms. Haley?
So with the social emotional learning, that's here, and when we go back to the planning and monitoring committee, there was a KP counseling. How is this different from KP counseling?
That's a great question. So this is a Tier 1 curriculum, which means it is a curriculum for all. And that means it'll be embedded in daily instruction, K through 12. What KP is offering is more Tier 3 services or Tier 2 services for students who need more, either in small group or individual counseling.
So that would bring me to the question. So with the KP counseling, that's only at Whitehead. Was that service not available to other schools, or did they not, know it was available, or?
So we have a couple different strategies that are related to KP. KP is special and unique to Whitehead. Their staff really galvanized around an entire focus around social emotional learning in their school, and they identified some action research that one of their teachers, Mallory Sage, was engaged with. She came and presented to the board. And so KP was selected as a partner specific to the needs of Whitehead. We also have a partnership with Rosecrans that's going to continue on. We're going to be able to hire 8 FTEs to continue services with our students in other schools, in our secondary schools. On top of that, we also have our social workers in our schools who provide support. We also have trauma therapists. We have our behavioral coaches, et cetera. So we have really a robust system of behavioral support. Whitehead created their own program with KP, with their discretionary funds.
So with Whitehead, is that funding, that's the cost of that program, is that coming out of like school-based discretionary?
Yes,
okay.
it is.
Thank you.
Any other question? Madam President?
So is Title I funding included in this discretionary dollars? And
It is.
And does Whitehead receive Title I funding?
They do.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, the SEL Tier 1 curriculum will be brought back to the board on July 16th, 2024 for a vote. Now I will go to the preview of consent items. Items 10A through 10C are consent items for the Planning and Development Committee. Are there any questions, comments, or concern on these consent items?
Not tonight. I'm not taking up any more time.
That completes the report for the Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you, Vice President McCall. I will now present the agenda items for Governance Committee. Board policies 5.20 and 7.20 are the district's non-harassment, non-discrimination policies with respect to staff and students. Their proposed changes reflect new statutory mandates requiring any such policies to include examples of discriminatory conduct and to provide staff members with the Illinois Department of Human Rights telephone number. In addition, the statutorily mandated changes, there are other wording changes and updates to the names and contact information for the district's complaint manager, Title IX, and non-discrimination coordinators. Board policies 2.260, 2.265, 5.10, and 7.10 must also be revised to update the names and contact information for the district's complaint manager, Title IX, and non-discrimination coordinators. Are there any questions or comments? If not, we are now on to the governance consent items. Are there any questions? We don't have any petition and communications portion of the meeting. So are there any, if no further comments or agenda recommendations by the board, I'll take a motion in a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, and you all have a good night.